Play different.
Greetings, fellow Mac addicts. In this video we're looking at Scarab of Ra, created by Rick Holzgraf. And I'm very excited to show you this game. Not only is it historically significant in being the very first first-person roguelike, it's also one of my very favourite games on the Macintosh. So let's dive in, shall we? Yes, shall. Let's start by going over everything you see when you first start the game. So up here is the news window, which lets you know what's actually going on in the game. Over here is the movement window, which lets you move around. You can also use the number pad, which I recommend because it's much faster. Whee! Over here we have the inventory. We start with a lantern and 16 ounces of food. Over here we actually see what our character can see, like that. And down here is our status. So we've got prestige, which is basically score, gold, which is gold, health, speed, hunger, weight. It's all pretty self-explanatory, but speed is very important, and I'll talk more about that later. So in order to move down a level, we have to find the key. Oh, there it is. So you found a key, pick up, doink, there we go, I now have a key. And then you find the door with the keyhole, and you use the key on the door, like so. Boink. The door creaks open and slams shut after you pass through. And that's an important thing to note, is that you can't go back once you've gone to the next level, so make sure you've searched as much as your heart desires. So as you explore the level, your map gets filled in automatically. So I started here and now I'm way down here, and this is all grey because I have not explored this area yet. You can make little notes here. Andrew was here. And so when I go back to the map, I can click on this. It says Andrew was here. So obviously you want to make important notes like there was treasure here, or there was a bank here, and so on and so forth. Something to note here is that the level is a 4x4 grid. To simulate the shape of a pyramid, each level gets larger by 1 square in both directions. So the next level will be 5x5, and then it'll be 6x6, up until level 20, in which it stops getting any bigger. So the aim of the game, apart from not dying a terrible death, is to find the 3 treasures of Ra: the Staff of Ra, the Crown of Ra, and the titular Scarab of Ra. And here's the Staff of Ra right here. Doink! Once you've found all 3 treasures, when you try to exit a level, it will give you the option to leave with the score you currently have, or you can keep on going to try and get a larger score and finish the game on the next level instead. But you do have the chance of dying a terrible death and losing a whole bunch of score. I asked Holzgraf if you miss a treasure hidden in a level, if it makes the game unwinnable. And he told me that he didn't want to give too much away, but no, it does not make the game unwinnable. So there you go. One of the most common threats in the game are traps, which you trigger by stepping on. There are wind traps, water traps, and spear traps. Traps are one of the most terrifying things in the game because the game is so quiet and then all of a sudden, ah! There are ways to deal with traps, but I'll leave that for you to discover for yourself. You can also encounter 3 animals in the game. There are lionesses who chase you around and maul you, there are snakes who poison you, which slowly drains your health, and worst of them all is a monkey who steals your stuff when you need it the most. I really hate that darn monkey. And this, my friends, is the Guardian, who plagued my nightmares for many years. It will begin chasing you as soon as you pick up the Scarab of Ra, and used to terrify me so much that I would seriously consider if I really wanted the treasure that badly or not. Holzgraf drew the sprite himself and was quite proud of it. He told me the Guardian was there to add tension. He wanted players to keep looking over their shoulders instead of just breezing along to the exit if they had the treasure. It also amused him to include a zombie-like mummy monster in the game. After all, what's a pyramid without a mummy? A major mechanic in Scarab of Ra is managing speed. If you're moving slowly, there's a greater chance of spotting a trap and also sneaking past sleeping animals. And let me tell you, there's nothing quite more tense than sneaking past a sleeping lioness. On the other hand, if you're going fast, you'll use fewer supplies like oil and food, and you'll also be able to outrun animals such as that pain in the bum monkey. Stop stealing my food, you darn monkey! Lugging too much stuff around can also burden the player, so if the Guardian's after you, you might want to drop all that gold so you can actually survive and make it to the next level. An interesting thing to note is that Holzgraf made things like the 10-foot pole weigh more than they would in real life to simulate the awkwardness of carrying such a large item. It's also important to note that peeking around a corner rather than just turning a corner saves a turn, so make sure you sneak a peek if you want to survive. I played this game so much when I was growing up. It felt like such an exciting and scary adventure being stuck in this structure full of traps and animals and treasure, and runs can turn into complete disasters so easily, and the first person view really added to the tension. As I became lost in the lower levels, it became a desperate struggle to survive, deciding if I wanted to take more risks for a bigger score or just get the heck out of Dodge, since ultimately it's a score driven game. And that's part of the reason why I just kept playing it again and again and again. Something you may have noticed is that although I'm carrying 203 ounces of gold, I have 0 under my status. This is because gold doesn't count towards your score unless you deposit it. And you deposit it by finding the Bank of Ra, which is just this message on the wall here. You just double click on your gold. It says how much you want to deposit. Let's go for the whole lot. Doink. And now I have 203 deposited. Now this really confused me as a child because it didn't seem to make any sense to me. Why would I deposit money into a wall? So I confronted Holzgraf about it. I was all, yo, what's the deal with depositing gold into a wall? And he told me that it's an ATM. The ancient Egyptians had ATMs and that he thought everybody knew that, so I guess he sure showed me. Here we have an example of the hieroglyphs that decorate the walls of the pyramid. I asked Holzgraf if they translate to anything meaningful in English, and he said, not really, they're just there for decorative purposes. But if you look them up in the resource fork, you can find their English translations. He did want me to clarify that he is by no means an expert on Egyptian culture, he just got stuff that he thought looked cool from books. Scarab of Ra actually didn't start out as a game per se. As a child, Holzgraf was fascinated by mazes, but he found God's eye views of the whole maze to be quite boring, and wanted to solve mazes from the inside. So the first version of Scarab was just a program to pretend that he was actually inside a maze, completely empty, just him and the maze. As I mentioned earlier, this game is a roguelike, which means it was heavily influenced by the game Rogue. The things it takes from Rogue is that each map layout is randomized each game. Death is permanent, so if you die, that's it, no resuming. And you can only save by quitting the game, so you can't make multiple saves because that, my friend, would be cheating. The game also encourages you to experiment with the items you find to find new strategies to deal with the various dangerous situations that you'll face inside the pyramid. Holzgraf confirmed that this was very much his entry into the roguelike genre, aside from a quick and dirty port of Rogue to the Mac. He couldn't count the amount of hours he'd spent playing Rogue prior to the development of Scarab of Ra. Unlike many other roguelikes, which are often overflowing with systems and items, Scarab of Ra is much more elegant with very tightly designed ones that complement each other. I asked Holzgraf if this was a conscious design, and he told me that not really. He threw in as much as he could think of, provided that it fit the setting and that it didn't require outrageous amounts of code. Magical potions and medieval weapons didn't fit the setting, for example, and mostly he just made the game that he wanted to play and then added enough polish to it that he wouldn't be ashamed to show it to other people. The game also isn't entirely random. For example, the Scarab is always going to show up at some point, and the chance of finding something like food is pretty high, so players don't constantly die from hunger every single time they play the game. Hazards and items also spawn more frequently the further you are in the game to keep things fresh and exciting. There were influences outside Rogue. For example, Holzgraf had access to Stanford University thanks to a friend who went there, and there he played Maze War on a Xerox Alto, which turned out to be a very large influence on the game. The tabletop game Dungeons & Dragons was also quite an influence, and was probably the source of the weight mechanic in Scarab of Ra. Another major influence which seems surprising at first but then makes incredible sense is the film Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Specifically the opening scene where Indiana Jones is first sneaking past traps and then running past traps in order to get that sweet, sweet treasure. And that pretty much sums up the game Scarab of Ra in a nutshell. Like many other roguelikes, Scarab of Ra encourages players to experiment with the items and systems in the game to figure out how they all work. However, Holzgraf didn't want players to become frustrated when playing the game, so he did include hints, but he did make it clear that he preferred you to find things out on your own by doing this. Let's go to hints. You really want a hint? Yes. You really should try to solve this on your own. Still want a hint? Yes. A long pause. Long pause, there we go. Wouldn't it be more fun to figure it out by yourself? Yes. But, oh! You got me that time, Holzgraf! It's for this reason why I won't be going too deep into the systems of the game. It's much more fun to figure things out on your own. An interesting thing to note is that you can't kill any of the animals in Scarab of Ra. You can capture them in a net, you can scare them away with a bullwhip, you can shoot them with a tranquilizer dart, and you can poke them with a big stick, although I don't recommend that one, or you can just run away. Because of this, I thought maybe Holzgraf had a great interest in animal welfare, and although he told me he does care about animals, it's not the reason why you can't kill them in the game. He gave me 3 reasons for his choice. The first is that he wanted Scarab to be mostly non-violent. The second is that an animal that's dead is dead forever, but an animal that's put to sleep can be woken up again, and that's more exciting. And the third reason is that by allowing animals not to be killed, he didn't have to draw any pictures of dead animals, and that's fair enough. I wouldn't want to draw pictures of dead animals too. Holzgraf also shared an interesting story with me about the first version of the game. Originally, he only programmed a fair distribution of items up to level 199, thinking no one could ever possibly get further than that. He was of course wrong, and someone did manage to get that far through methods which I would consider cheating. But it turns out that cheaters never prosper, because after level 199, the levels are filled with nothing but lions. I ain't lying when I say I find that hilarious. Anyway, in version 1.4 he programmed fair distribution all the way to level 32,000, and to his knowledge no one has ever gone that far, and I doubt anyone ever will. Just to note that Holzgraf is still in the gaming industry today. You can find Solitaire Till Dawn on the Mac App Store, which he's been updating for over 25 years now, and he's also worked on some board games, and I'll link to more information about them below. And there we have one of my very favourite games on the Macintosh, Scarab of Ra!